Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, November 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The game against Michigan in 5 days. If you are planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. All right, I had today's show all planned out. I had all the graphics made. I'd even posted the graphics on our board to start having a conversation with our members about it earlier in the day. And then the Big Ten announced at 4 o'clock, okay, we're going to do a big announcement about exactly what you're doing this morning show on. So I thought, okay, I'm going to wait until the Big Ten puts out their thing just to make sure I'm right. Good news, everything's okay. So we're good. We're all set. So here we go. We're going to run through on today's show the Big Ten tiebreaker scenarios. And the Big Ten has a whole list of them on their website. There are 7 different scenarios on their website. We're not going to go through all of them. We're going to go through most of the sort of logical, kind of plausible ones, and then we'll also, kind of do the fun one where, when you're taking a picture with kids and you're like, all right, and we're going to do one fun one at the end. We're going to do the fun one where all the crazy stuff happens and you get a really wild outcome. So we're going to go through all that stuff. We did this a couple weeks ago. Now we've got a lot fewer options. There are only 4 teams who are still in the race for the Big Ten championship, and there are only 3 games that really matter this upcoming weekend. This is just sort of like remember when in school they used to make you show your work? This is sort of a show your work on some of the stuff we're going to be talking about later in the week in terms of, boy, these 2 teams could actually end up playing again next week. This is the show your work show on how that all goes together. So, all right, here we go. Scenario 1, this is the easy one. This is the very straightforward one. The 2 favorites this weekend among the unbeaten teams, Ohio State and Indiana, they both win. Indiana beats Purdue in the Old Oak Bucket game. Ohio State beats Michigan in the game. Bing, bang, boom, easy peasy. Ohio State and Indiana will face off in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship. Okay, that's really easy. So that's probably no questions there. Okay, let's move on to scenario 2. This is where Indiana beats Purdue, but Michigan beats Ohio State. And if Michigan beats Ohio State, then all of a sudden the Oregon-Washington game starts to matter. So in this scenario, Indiana wins, Michigan wins, and Oregon beats Washington. So at that point, Indiana's in. Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon all finished tied. The first tiebreaker between those teams is the head-to-head, but the 3 teams didn't all play, so then it goes to the next tiebreaker, which is opponent conference winning percentage. Oregon gets the advantage there. So that would be Indiana and Oregon in scenario 2. All right, so far so good. Well, I'm not sure Ohio State fans would agree so good on the last one, but that's okay. We'll keep moving on. Scenario 3. Indiana beats Purdue, Michigan beats Ohio State, but Washington upsets Oregon. So in that case, Indiana's in, and then Michigan and Ohio State are tied with 1 loss each in conference play. In that case, Michigan goes to Indianapolis because of the head-to-head with Ohio State. So that would be Indiana versus Michigan if Indiana, Michigan, and Washington all win. All right. Now to scenario 4. This is where things start getting a little wonky because Ohio State and Michigan, that's like about a 10-point spread. Purdue and Indiana, the Boilermakers are about a 4-touchdown underdog in that one. So probably not, but we'll just sort of dive into this just to sort of cover all of our bases. Purdue beats Indiana. Ohio State beats Michigan. Oregon beats Washington. In that case, Ohio State's in because they're the only undefeated team in conference. And then in that case, Indiana gets in over Oregon because of a head-to-head win. You got to remember the Hoosiers went out to Eugene earlier in the year, beat the Ducks. So in that case, Indiana has the head-to-head win over Oregon. They would get in, and it would be Ohio State, Indiana, just like it would if all the normal stuff happened. So you get one shocking upset, and it doesn't necessarily matter depending on where it is. All right, so now we're going to do one. This is scenario 5, and this is like the real chaos scenario. This is Purdue beats Indiana in the Old Oak Bucket game. Michigan beats Ohio State in the game. Washington beats Oregon. So you get the 3 upsets in the 3 games that matter. So then that means Ohio State, Michigan, and Indiana all finish with 1 loss in conference play. Oregon would have 2. They're out. So those 3 teams did not play head-to-head, but they all played a common opponent. All 3 of them played Purdue. And then that's the next tiebreaker. Your record against the next common opponent. Ohio State won. They beat Purdue. Michigan won. They beat Purdue. In this scenario, Indiana lost to Purdue. So that means, guess who plays in Indianapolis? Ohio State and Michigan. So yes, you could have Buckeyes and Wolverines 2 weeks in a row. Scenario 6, Purdue beats Indiana, Michigan beats Ohio State, Oregon beats Washington. So at that point, Oregon is ahead of everyone else with the best opponent conference winning percentage. So so Indiana's so they get in. Then Indiana gets eliminated because of that loss to Purdue that we just talked about in terms of a common conference opponent. That one that we just talked about in the last thing. So then Michigan would get in over Ohio State to get into Indianapolis. So then it would be Oregon, and then it would be Michigan. So there you go. So there's just 6 of the scenarios. There's a whole website. I'll link the website on the Big Ten's website with where all these scenarios actually are, and they have all the different stuff typed out. And there's a couple other ones that they have on there as well. So just kind of an interesting thing to just, again, like I said, we're going to sort of show our work here when we're having these conversations later, about later in the week that Ohio State, if Ohio State loses, that doesn't mean they're boxed out from Indianapolis, and that those two teams could even potentially play. So just sort of wanted to lay that all out for you. If you want to see all of the Big Ten tiebreakers, we did a show just a couple weeks ago titled something like "Could Ohio State and Michigan play in the Big Ten championship game?" You'll find that on the Buckeyes TomOrrow Morning podcast feed as well. Did that with all of the Big Ten bylaws, all the bylaws you love to hear me read. That was all on that show. So you want to get the specifics on the Big Ten tiebreakers, it's all there. You want to get the specifics on how those tiebreakers will be applied this weekend, it'll be all in that link to the Big Ten's website that I will have in the link in the listing for today's show. So, all right, so there's your Big Ten tiebreakers. Here's a look at what you can maybe expect the rest of the week from us on the Buckeyes TomOrrow Morning feed. Monday, Sharon Moore will be having his press conference, Michigan's head coach. We'll try and get you some clips from that. If, some of the interesting stuff that he says, if there's any players that say anything interesting, we'll try and give you some clips of that to enjoy. Tuesday, Ryan Day will have his press conference. That'll be noon on Tuesday. We will be there live for that. Have our usual live stream. I guess we'll probably have a few more viewers than we typically do for those Tuesday live shows, because boy, isn't this going to be a fascinating week for Ohio State and for Michigan. Wednesday evening, we're going to get the Ohio State captains. That'll be after practice. Guessing that's probably about 5 o'clock. We will stream those interviews live as well for you. Again, about 5 o'clock or so on Wednesday evening. But then we'll have more coverage. We'll have the Ross Fulton shows and all that kind of stuff this week as well. You're going to end up getting some bonus episodes here and there throughout the week because there is just way too much to talk about. And there is so much to talk about that we are just absolutely flooding the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed with lots of shows. Tony Gerderman and I stayed and recorded a couple extra shows on Saturday night at the stadium before we left. We're doing a bunch of shows that we're recording on Sunday to have for Sunday night, Monday morning, and start getting you tons of content throughout the week. We got the usual Michigan Monday show. We've got a bunch of listener question shows. And then we have a bunch of scenario shows. What is it? If Ohio State wins, what does that look like? If Michigan wins, what does that look like? What has to happen for Michigan to pull the upset? What has to happen for Ohio State to get off the schneid and beat Michigan for the first time since 2019? So there you go. So a look at some of the stuff you got coming this week. Make sure you're subscribed to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the Buckeyes TomOrrow Morning podcast. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And finally, why don't you check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com? We got our whole team of insiders covering the Buckeyes, covering recruiting, covering X's and O's, and much, much more. Plus a really fun and active community on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruiz Columbus. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.